Hello Mini Makers! Today we'll be making Valoo from The Legend of Zelda Wind Waker for 3D printing. We will begin with the basic shapes. Add a sphere for the body and use proportional editing to give the sphere a teardrop appearance. Next, we can add a metaball cylinder for the thigh and for the leg. For the foot, add a cube and size it in the Z and Y dimensions, and use subdivide surfaces to give it a good appearance. Create a loop cut along the edge of the foot and use the edge slide tool to slide the loop cut towards the bottom of the foot to give the bottom of the foot a flat appearance. Next, you will want to create the toe claws by adding a cylinder, subdivide surfaces, and size the face of the cylinder towards the center of the face to make a tip. You can then mirror the claw across the foot, using the foot as a mirror object, and add a center toe claw as well. We can convert the leg to a mesh and mirror the leg across the body using the body as a mirror object. Next, we can begin adding the arms by adding a vertex and using the skin and subdivide surface modifier to give the general shape of the arms. In edit mode, extrude the vertices to create an elbow and the wrist. We can make the neck by adding a curve and shaping the curve in edit mode to give the shape similar to the neck that is seen in the concept art. Give the neck some thickness by going to the geometry tab in the curve tab and add some depth. We can size the individual vertices of the neck using Alt S. Next, we can make the tail in a similar fashion, making sure to give the tail a little bit more of a bend like what is seen in the concept art. Now we will spend a little bit of time making sure the shapes are close to the concept art before we enter sculpt mode to add more details. We can make the head by adding a sphere and using proportional editing to make a head-like shape. This does not have to be perfect because we'll be making the majority of our edits in sculpt mode. Make sure to look on the model multiple times to make sure that it is looking good from all angles and to make sure you are happy with how the model looks in a base form before you begin refining the shapes. These will be the shapes that we will use to block out the body. Do not worry about getting the shapes perfect, but do spend some time getting the shapes as close as you can, as it will make your job easier later on. We will begin by refining the head in sculpt mode. This will be done by using a combination of the smooth tool, the inflate tool, the snake hook tool, and the clay strips tool. Be sure to look at any concept art or more character models from the game to get a good look of how the head should look. We can make sure that mirroring is enabled and pull out the nose using the snake hook tool. To make the lower jaw, we can use the mask tool to block out the basic shape of the lower jaw, invert the mask, and use the grab tool to pull out the basic shape of the lower jaw. After we have blocked out the basic shape for the lower jaw, we can then invert the mask again to create the fangs on the top jaw. We can do that by using the snake hook tool and setting the fall off to sharp. With quick strokes, pull out the fangs. We can refine the shape of the upper snout using the scrape tool and the smooth tool. We can then add a dividing line between the red and tan patterns using the crease tool with stabilized strokes enabled. Next, we can begin making the upper eyebrow region. We can do this by adding some shape to the brow region with the draw tool and the grab tool. We can then add the eye holes by using the mask tool, inverting the mask, and using the inflate mesh filter tool to push the hole into the body of the head. For the eye, we can add a sphere, size it in the X and Y dimensions, and place it in the eye socket to see how you have to move the eye so that it fits how you want it to look. We can then switch back to the head and use the grab tool to move the eye socket better to match the eye. The next basic shape we can add are the tufts of hair that come at the top of the head. We can make these by adding a curve, giving it some volume, and using the bevel in the geometry tab setting to size the tips and mirror across the head. We can now add the beard by adding a curve and adding a circle curve to be your bevel object. This is the way we can give the beard a flat appearance that is seen on the concept art. The circle should be sized smaller and then sized in the Y dimension to give it a flat shape. Now we can move on to give the brow region a little bit more of a refined shape. We can do this by using the snake hook tool and the mask tool to pull the brow like seen in the concept art. Make sure to smooth out any connections so the brow looks natural, but do not smooth the connections out too much as you still want to see the defined shape of the brow. This can be done in multiple stages depending on how you want the brow to look. To give the eyebrow a flat appearance, you can use the scrape tool and the smooth tool. Next, we want to pull out the eyebrow so that it floats above the cheek, like seen in the concept. We can do this by using the snake hook tool and pulling out a small section of the brow, add some volume using the inflate tool, and use the crease tool to give it a sharper look. To finish off the head, we can add the bluish pattern around the eyes and the snout by making a mask, inverting the mask, and using the inflate mesh filter tool to pull the blue shape out a small amount to give very defined borders of the blue section. We can use the draw tool and the pinch tool to enforce this boundary. If you are liking this commentary so far, please like and subscribe. I really appreciate it. Next, we can make the fins that come off the back of the head by adding a cube, sizing it in the X dimension, and using subdivide surfaces and moving the vertices to get the shape how you would like to have them. They can be mirrored across the head after this. It is okay if you do not have everything perfect the first time, and you can affect the model at any point and mess with the details, so it is okay to start over at any point you feel. To give the nose points slightly more sharpness, you can use the multi-plane scrape tool. Moving on to the beard. This is a good example of when starting over is good when you have made a small mistake. I will begin by using the mask to try to get the tip of the beard correct, and it looks like it was not going to work the way I wanted it. So I started over by removing the section using a cube with the Boolean difference tool in the bool tool add-on. Then I just use the snake hook tool to pull down the sides of the beard. Now we can move on to giving the tufts of hair a more refined shape by using the snake hook tool to pull out small tufts of hair. Then we can mirror the tufts of hair using the head as a mirrored object and finishing the shape with the snake hook tool. We can now give the body some more geometry by using the subdivide surfaces and dynamic topology, and refine the shape of the stomach and body using the inflate tool and the smooth tool. We can then convert the neck curve into a mesh and union the neck to the body using the bool tool add-on. Make sure you add a filled face at the edge of the neck. After this, we can make the shape of the chest using the clay strips tool and the smooth tool as well as the crease tool to give a strong defined shape for the chest. Make sure you look at your model from all sides and add more thickness to the places where you believe there should be more thickness. We can now move on to the legs. We can convert the legs to a mesh and begin adding some shape using the blob tool and the pinch tool. Feel free to add some geometry using dynamic topology at any point. To make the large flat scales on the leg, use the mask tool and get the basic shapes. If you look at the concept art, the shape on both legs do not appear to be uniform, so choose whichever shape you like the most and use those as your guide. After you have made the shape of the large scales, use the inflate mesh filter to pull out the scales from the leg. Next we will move on to the feet. This is a good example of why making a good shape in the beginning will save you a lot of time later. For the feet, I use the snake hook tool predominantly to get a very refined shape. I then use the mask tool with symmetry enabled to create the toes that extend out the front of the foot. I use the snake hook tool to put them out of the foot and then smooth the toes out. After adding some topology, I then sized the toe claws to fit the general shape of the toe. I moved the tip of the toe claw to give them a more curved look. I then used the crease tool to give a more significant bend at the leg and moved on to smooth out the connection between the toes and the rest of the foot. I then gave it a more interesting shape with the clay strips tool. We can now move on to make the hand, which is made simply by adding a cube, subdividing surfaces, and adding some edge loops to make it more a square-like shaped hand. For the fingers, I added a vertice and used the skin and subdivide surface modifier to give them a bowling ball pin-like shape. These can be duplicated, or they can be made using the overlay modifier. I then refined the shape in Sculpt mode by adding some more volume to the tips of the finger like is seen in the concept art. I Boolean union the fingers to the hand and make sure to smooth out any connection by adding geometry using dynamic topology and smoothing out the connections. You can give the fingers more dimension by using the clay strips tool like I did in the foot. For the hand claws, I duplicated the toe claws and moved them to the edge of each finger. Then I moved the hand to the arm and sized the hand in the Z dimension to give it a little bit more thickness. Since this will be a 3D print and you do not want anything too thin or they may be messed up during the printing process. I converted the tail to a mesh, filled in the tips of the tail using F to fill in the ends of the tail, and subdivided surfaces. For the hooks at the edge of the tail, I added a cube and added loop cuts, moved the vertices into a shape that I felt comfortable with. I then refined the shape in sculpt mode using the snake hook tool and the pinch tool. After I got a shape that I felt comfortable with, I mirrored the hooks across the tail using the tail as a mirrored object. I made sure that I did not have merge selected because you do not want the hooks to merge. After the modifier was applied, I used L to select one of the hooks, separated the hooks by selection, and I unioned the hooks to the tail after this. For the tail spike, I used the snake hook tool to pull out the spike and used a combination of the inflate tool and the pinch tool to give the hook shape a shape I enjoyed. The next portion of the tail is the scales that come out towards the body. These were made using the mask tool and the snake hook tool, making sure that they stayed slightly blocky like is seen in the concept art. I used the crease tool to emphasize the shape of the scales. For the back plates of the dragon tail, I used the mask tool and pulled out the plates using the snake hook tool, making sure that the plates did not overlap with each other and making sure the plates had enough room underneath the plates so that the model could be painted easily when the model is printed. You can spend some time getting this portion correct as well. This is the slightly harder part of the model to get very good. We are entering the final stages of the model. This includes adding the dividing line between the tan parts of the body and the red parts of the body. This can be done using a mask tool with stabilized stroke enabled to give a very easy smooth line. Then use the inflate mesh tool and the pinch tool to give clear defining boundaries. Next, we can move on to unioning the hand to the arm and making sure the connection between the arm and the hand looks natural. This can be done by adding some geometry with dynamic topology and using the clay strips tool to give the natural bend you can see when you put your hand down on a table. We can now union the arms to the body, add some geometry using dynamic topology, and create a smooth union between the body and the arms. I added some thickness where the arms met the back of the body using the clay strips tool in order to give a better look for the shoulders and shoulder blades. By adding these little details, the model looks a little bit better and a little bit more like the concept art. A good example of this is where I used the snake hook tool to push the body in slightly where the body would connect with the legs. This is because the legs are pushing in on the stomach. We can take this type of thinking to all of the joints and using the practice of smoothing and adding some more volume at each connection point to give a smoother and more realistic connection. If you begin to start seeing some lag while modeling the model, you can always decimate the model to reduce the lag that you see, and this will also prevent issues such as Blender clashing on you when you're sculpting or modeling in high detail. We are nearing the end of the model, and this is one of the last parts of the model that we are doing. We are adding the wings to the back. This can be done by adding a cube or just duplicating the blades that are coming out of the head, and uniting them to the body after mirroring them. Make sure that none of the mirrored pairs intersect with each other, as this will cause issues in the 3D printing process. At this point, you could add slightly more details to the wings, such as small dots for the pattern seen in the concept art, or the scale seen near the shoulders and on the legs. I will leave this detail out because I enjoy painting the small details like this on the model after the miniature is printed. The very last step to do is also the most satisfying step, which is to union all the pieces together and begin the final smoothing of any pieces. When unioning, be sure to constantly look at the inside of the model and make sure there are no overlaps, because these will cause issues in the 3D printing process. I appreciate everybody for sticking with this tutorial. Please let me know if this tutorial helped and if you would like to see further long tutorials like this in the future. If you like this model and want to print it yourself, please go to my printables page in the description and download it for yourself. If you would like to support more models and more videos, please support me on my Patreon page.